All right, my good friends, this is Mr. Davis. I am sure you are jacked up for week numero trace of non-traditional instruction. So hopefully it's going well. Hopefully you're getting the hang of it. Teachers maybe are getting a little bit better with technology, maybe introducing new things. I know I have introduced the Ed Puzzle because I think it's a way to kind of ensure you to go through notes. Now, I will say that there's always a way to get by, to slack off, to cheat, etc. But in the end of the day, you're just cheating yourselves. Hopefully you kind of you know what to expect from me by now. I'm going to post an assignment, and I'm going to give you usually like 36 to 40 hours to complete the assignment, and it's a little bit less than a regular class period. And I might give you an assignment, and it's homework now. It really wouldn't be homework if we were in class. I wouldn't be giving you 4 or 5 days of homework in class, but we just don't have that. It's just not the same setting. So if you get something to do every night, please note that I'm not scaling up the amount of homework I would be doing. I'm just trying to make it more as authentic as we possibly can, not being in school. So if you have any problems with that, I think you're getting used to it. I might give you more, I might give you less than other teachers. This is just what seems to be working for me so far. So make sure you also take the quiz. The only thing you have to do is do this Ed puzzle tonight, and then we need that done by Tuesday at 9 o'clock. All right, so we are talking about World War One. Now, if we were in school, we probably wouldn't have been there yet. Probably would have focused a little bit more on um, Germany and the United States, its relationship, Italy becoming a country. But in an effort to kind of keep your attention a little bit, I like to talk about pretty um, interesting things now. Yeah, but also, anytime I need to explain, we might go back and talk about a few things to kind of explain things. But what changed in Europe and in the world? So this is a big dog we're going to talk about. Germany becomes a country. Italy also becomes a country, basically right around the same time. It's kind of interesting because the Holy Roman Empire and the Germanic states have been around for thousands of years, but now we're official borders. The boot of Italy is one unified place, and Germany is one big country as well. So they are now countries. Germany is going to be more important for both World War One and of course World War Two, but Italy will be a important place too. The Industrial Revolution drove the need for raw materials. So why that is so important is that these big countries are going to have to go all over the world to get stuff, particularly if this E was England, they got to go down south to Africa. And we're going to see a new exploitation of the continent of Africa, where the whole continent is going to get carved up literally with only two free states. Ethiopia and Liberia are basically going to be the only free territories in Africa, because the Europeans will say, well, we want the Congo. We like the Suez Canal, so Britain, we're going to take Egypt. It's pretty crazy, pretty horrific what they're going to do down in Africa. So technically the slave trade is over, but they still need workers, they still need raw materials, and we just enter another ugly chapter of exploitation of people and resources in Africa. The United States at this point had become an empire after the Spanish American War. It's important to note that the United States was not like an empire after we beat the British. We beat the British. We're our own country, but we are a struggling country at that. So we're not an empire. It's going to take from 1776 to about 1898 when we defeat the Spanish in the Spanish American War that we technically become an empire, because what we do is we gobble up all of Spain's overseas territories. The United States is also going from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they're taking all of Spain's territory away in the southwestern part of the United States. Some people believe that the United States was actually going to take over Canada and take over Mexico and basically be one huge North American country, like have everything. So that, of course, didn't happen, but we are a power. And after World War II, this stands for in my humble opinion, if you ever see that in the future anywhere, in my humble opinion, the United States would be the most powerful country in the world. And one of the main reasons is because we didn't get attacked in World War I. Okay, so we didn't get attacked, and that's one of the reasons why we are so powerful. Alrighty, so let's pick it up here in these slides. Alright, so I talked about all those things that had changed in Europe and then are going to change the world. So the end of peace. In contrast to the 1700s, the 1800s were an era of relative stability in the international relations. The one thing they do say, I will say, is that the beginning of the 1800s saw Napoleon, but after Napoleon, they entered kind of a peaceful period. They all kind of teamed up against Napoleon, so that gives you allies and maybe less people to be adversaries against. But the one thing that is going to go on is we're going to see some secret deals happen behind the scenes, especially as we get closer to 1914 and World War I. And secrets, we know, are no fun. You guys all know that. What's going to happen is, something's going to spark, and then all of a sudden the dominoes are going to fall into place, and people aren't really going to realize, that secret existed, and that's going to play a big part in World War I, and I'll get to. So here's some amazing pictures. Now we're at wars where you're going to see some pictures, which is really cool. This is the trenches. Okay, so this World War I was known for trench warfare. Literally, you dug in and you stayed in your trench. In between your side and the other trench was called no man's land. This would be a time of war that Julius Caesar, George Washington, Napoleon, for sure, they would be ramming their heads against this trench because they're used to planning an attack, being strategic, outmaneuvering, outflanking the other side. But now it's just like you dig in, and then for 4 years, you just bomb the heck out of each other. You shoot the heck out of each other. We're going to see some videos where they call it morning hate, is when these bros down here would just wake up and fire as much machine guns as they could for a 5-minute period because they're so frustrated on just being stuck in the trenches. So some famous things. You're also going to see some chemical weapons being used in this point, that the chemical weapons are illegal in warfare. A good trivia question, though, is that the Syrian president is still using chemical weapons against people that oppose him in the country of Syria today. So national and imperial rivalries, like I said, the secrets are no fun, and they're going to affect everyone. All right, so, excuse me. 1914, the nations of Europe dominated the world. Great Britain alone controlled 1/5 of the world's landmass, and I always say the sun never sets on the British Empire because they had territory all over the world. Also, these countries, along with some other European nations, pretty much carved out the whole entire continent of Africa. And what's going to happen is they're going to start bumping into one another outside of their own, original countries, and that's going to lead to some tension and maybe even some warfare, and we'll see how we get there. So this is what we're talking about. Germany had become a country here. One thing, Germany was a new nation. They were a prideful nation. They became a country because they used their military force to exert their will, and they become a country in the 1870s. And one thing, when you're the new kid on the block, you like to flex your muscle to show that everybody else that don't mess with Germany. So one thing that they were doing, the Germans, they were building up their navy. They had their eye on the United Kingdom. United Kingdom has always been known for their Royal Navy because nobody attacks the UK. One time it was attacked in history successfully. William of Hastings in 1066 AD attacked from France, and he was also known as William the Conqueror because he conquered England in 1066. Other than that, nobody attacks him. So they have this great Royal Navy that, exerts their will all over the world. Well, Germany says, if they have a great Navy, we're going to build our Navy up. And it was very clear what they were doing to the United Kingdom, to France. So everybody starts getting a little bit leery of Germany. Sometimes these will be called the Central Powers right here because it goes down the center of Europe. Germany will be teaming up with Austria-Hungary. They'll be teaming up with Italy the beginning of the First War, and then Italy will jump sides in the First War. And then in World War II, a guy by the name of Benito Mussolini, this really terrible guy, will team up with Hitler. So just read that slide, pause it if you need to, about the powers. One thing we're going to see is that the Germans are going to have to fight a war on two fronts, their Eastern and their Western front, which is not going to be helpful for them. The emergence of Germany and Italy had changed the balance of power. Other nations look for ways to contain Germany's ambition. We see the word ambition used with a singular person way back right before Jesus Christ was born with Caesar. A lot of times they said Caesar was very ambitious. Germany is getting that term ambition as well. Sometimes ambition is used in a good way, like that guy's ambitious. He wants to work his way to the top of the company. Or sometimes people use it in a bad light. They say, man, that guy's ambitious. He would stop at nothing to get the new promotion, etc. This way, they're talking about Germany is ambitious and they want to be the best country in the world, and they're going to stop at nothing. You're also going to see some nationalist movements taking place in Russia and Austria-Hungary. Russia is going to be a very volatile country that we'll talk about towards the end of World War I. So militarism, this is a term that just basically stood for like you're spending all of your country's resources on your military, building up your military. And this shows you how seriously they took the military aspect of being a country. When Germany became a nation, their title they used was Kaiser. And Kaiser relates to what person? It's a tribute to what person do you think? I'll call on Alex Rice. So what person, Alex, do you think this is a tribute to? Give you a second. You're right. It's Caesar. Caesar. So Kaiser and Caesar is a tribute to Julius. Now, another country also has a similar title, spelled differently, not pronounced the same. It's another nation that uses a tribute to Caesar. I will call on my good friend. I will call on Alexis. Alexis, what other country uses a similar title? You're right, Alexis. It is Russia with their Tsar term. And this is, let's see, Kaiser Wilhelm, this is a quote, "I and the army, we were born for each other." So that's the leader of the country. So, yeah, the commander-in-chief would fit the Kaiser well at this point. Countries realized that powerful nations got what they wanted. They would not agree with Jesus's, Sermon on the Mount that the meek shall inherit the earth. They would say the bully gets the earth because they're going to go out and take it. Attack is the best defense. So we are going to war. Many people, this is when we start off in World War I, it is a romantic view of war. It's like your video game view of war, or if you've ever played Risk or basically any type of video game where you play and you get to romanticize war. And what I mean by that is like you're the guy that goes off to war and you come back and the girl down the street, falls in love with you because you're such a hero and you're going to be a hero forever. When actuality, some guys are going to go out to war. They're going to be racing each other, trying to beat each other to the draft office to get signed up in these different countries to fight for their country. And then what's going to happen is they're going to go straight to the front lines, and some of them might spend 4 stinking years in the trenches. And when they get back, they realize that war is not romantic. But in this point of history, it is really romantic because we hadn't had a big war in a long time. And so we're going generations without like national heroes, maybe. And so people start romanticizing war. And then actually a guy in the United States, he was Alfred Thayer Mahon. He was an officer in the Civil War, and he wrote a book. And it's basically his book said, if you want to be the biggest and the best country in the world, you need to develop your Navy. And the Kaiser read the book, and he gets really jacked up into developing Germany's navy. So translations of Mahan's writings appeared in many languages. Japanese, the leaders use this as an example of their own expansion. They said this is kind of similar to Christopher Columbus maybe devouring the travels from Marco Polo. Kaiser William, he's also sometimes, I might say William or Wilhelm. I think the book uses the term William, but most people use the term Wilhelm. So Kaiser Wilhelm devoured the book, and he orders a massive buildup in Germany. This is going to greatly concern the British. They realize that they're not just like building this navy up just to be nice and cute. They're building this navy up for a purpose. So we're going to see here, this will be our last slide before we get into what's going to happen. So as Germany's power grew, a system of military alliances emerged that eventually included all the European states. This is the origin of the alliance system, which is a vocab term. Germany had defeated the French in the Franco-Prussian War. They had always wanted a buffer between them and Russia. So what they do is they realize that they're the meat in the European sandwich here, so they want allies. And so what's going to happen is one little event is going to knock down a domino, a little domino. That's going to knock down a bigger domino. That's even going to knock down a gigantic domino. And we're going to see exactly what happens. But at this point, we have a triple alliance, Germany and Austria, mainly is what we want to worry about. Italy, we'll talk about like kind of the twisted web Italy is in at the start of World War I. But we're going to go to this video now. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to play this video. We'll be looking at this channel a lot. It's called the Great War Channel. And this guy's named Indy Idell, and he does a really good job. So we will get started here. Got a pretty cool map in the background, so let's rock and roll.
It's going to cover the First World War week by week as it unfolded 100 years later, from today until November 2018. So you can really get a sense of just what happened as it happened. The active weeks, the passive weeks, the weeks of carnage, and the weeks of hope, we'll follow them all one by one. And we've made a couple of special episodes about the prelude to war, so you can get some idea of all of the forces in motion. We've also made a special episode about the assassination of the Archduke and his wife, as it was one of the pivotal moments in our history. All three of these episodes will come out in the next few days. 100 years ago today, on July 28, 1914, the Empire of Austria-Hungary declared war on the Kingdom of Serbia. Now, as you are probably aware, this snowballed within days into the First World War. Now, people often talk about the blank check, when Kaiser Wilhelm said on July 5th, 1914, that he would unconditionally support Austria in whatever actions she took against Serbia. And this is seen as the main argument for Germany's responsibility for the war. But this is a little too simple. In the days following the assassination of the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo by the Serb Gavrilo Princip, there were anti-Serbian riots and demonstrations in much of Bosnia, and official dispatches to Vienna that there was Serbian complicity in the plot. But general European reactions to the killings were quite mild. Austria, however, had big ideas, many of them coming from Army Chief of Staff Konrad von Hotzendorf, and I love that name. Konrad was a vehement imperialist for Austria and Austrian greatness. He's also been described as being, quote, the most dangerous kind of officer, both stupid and intensely energetic. There you have it. In fact, in the year and a half before today, 1914, he asked his government to go to war no less than 26 times. And it's very important to note here that his main counterweight, the man who repeatedly urged Emperor Franz Joseph against war with Russia or war with Serbia, not to listen to Konrad, was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, now deceased. The assassination was, to Konrad, a heaven-sent means to curb Serbian power and ambition. Now, to understand the next few weeks, we really need to look a bit at both Germany and Russia. In 1912, the Kaiser had told Army Chief of Staff von Moltke and Grand Admiral von Tirpitz that, quote, Austria had to act vigorously against the foreign Slavs. If Russia were to support the Serbs, war would be inevitable for us. Although we think of pre-war Russia today as a backwater, this was not really the case. Russia had become the world's fourth largest economy by 1914. Okay, shortage of money had always meant before that she had never been able to build and equip her army like the Germans could, but more importantly, her railways. By 1914, though, Russian currency was on the gold standard, and the railroads were booming, and Russia would be able to easily and quickly defend her borders in only a few years. Now this was a big fear in the German high command. Since Russia obviously had the manpower advantage, once her railways were a match for Germany, well, German Chancellor von Bethmann-Hollweg's diary from July 7th tells us these thoughts, that Russia had become a nightmare, and that the German generals say there must be a war before it was too late. By 1917, Germany has no hope, so better 1914. As an aside here, this was the opinion of the generals and some government leaders, but it was not the opinion of the German people at large. You see, Germany had the largest population of socialists in Europe, and they and others comprised a big anti-war segment of society. So the Kaiser wrote on June 30th, the Serbs must be disposed of, and right soon. And he did pledge German support for Austria, and he did tell the Austrian ambassador on July 5th that should war between Austria-Hungary and Russia prove unavoidable, Germany would be at Austria's side. However, and this is really important, he also told his chancellor that he did not think there was a real prospect of war, that Russia was not close to being ready. The next day, he went on his annual 3-week vacation cruise to Norway, which is kind of not what you do if you were basically the most powerful man in the world and you were about to go to a major war. So in spite of it all, a world war was not on the Kaiser's mind. So, on July 7th, the Austro-Hungarian cabinet met to discuss Serbia, and they were for a war to reduce Serbia's size and make her dependent on Austria. On July 13th, a secret report reached Vienna from Sarajevo that there was zero evidence the Serbian government had anything to do with the assassination. Now, this didn't really change anything, but this did. Franz Joseph finally became convinced that Austria could take action against Serbia without any other powers interfering, so he agreed to issue an ultimatum. The terms of the ultimatum were finalized on July 19th. It had a total of 15 demands, and it linked the Belgrade government with the assassination, even without evidence. Now, you can look up the demands yourself, but here are a couple that really stick out. The Serbian government must condemn anti-Austrian propaganda and punish anyone who made or distributed it. And the big one, Austrian officials would participate in the judicial process in Serbia. Yep, they would be in charge of justice in another country. Now, as you may guess, this ultimatum was designed to be rejected. It was sent on July 23rd with 48 hours for Serbia to agree to it. 6 p.m. on July 25th, Serbia answered the ultimatum. She agreed that anti-Austrian propagandists would be punished and subversive movements suppressed, and actually agreed to almost everything else. But as to Austria participating in the judicial process within Serbia, Serbia simply asked that this demand be submitted to the tribunal in The Hague. Now, everybody except Austria thought this response was just fine, but Austria was determined to go to war. Actually, Russia suggested 2 days later that negotiations between her and Vienna should be open to try and sort things out. This was refused. A British attempt the same day to talk Germany into having a 4-power conference to also try to sort things out was rejected as well. You know what? Here's something that happened then that remained secret until after the war. On July 28th, 100 years ago today, Kaiser Wilhelm finally read the full text of the Austrian ultimatum and Serbia's response, and he could see no reason at all for Austria to declare war. Yep, after all this had happened, the Kaiser wrote, "A great moral victory for Vienna, but with it, every reason for war is removed." And just about an hour after the Kaiser scribbled that in the margins, Emperor Franz Joseph signed a declaration of war on Serbia, confident of German support. And that declaration would turn out to be the death warrant of his own empire. We'll see you next week. Click subscribe to get each and every episode as it comes out. And if you like the show, but English isn't your best language, once again...
Okay, let's see here. So that was a really good preview of what's going to happen. There's going to be a powder keg. There's going to be one kind of, I wouldn't say low-level official, but one country's official is going to get assassinated, and then all hell's going to break out. But way prior to this, Otto von Bismarck was one of the men that helped get Germany started as a country. And when he got Germany started, he realized that he is in the middle of the continent. So he had made a treaty with Russia called the Reinsurance Treaty, and that basically that said, hey, if Austria, one of our allies, attacks you, we will not get involved. We will remain neutral. So that was a really smart treaty for him to come up with. But the Kaiser, who we were talking about, that was saying like he was the big commander in chief, he let that treaty expire, and that's going to be a big reason why we get rocking and rolling in this World War I. Also, what Germany needed to do is they had to figure out how the heck they were going to fight a war when they're smack dab in the middle of the continent. So they came up, General Marshal von Schlieffen came up with the Schlieffen Plan. Basically, what it says, hey, we're going to knock out France, and then we'll attack Russia if that's going to be what it takes. But basically, what they said is, we're just knocking something out, and then we can focus all of our attention after we conquer this one area. So the area they said would be easier to tackle would be France. Once they attack France, then they can attack Russia, because then they don't have to worry about the French attacking them on the other side. Britain, what's going on in Britain at this time period is Britain is, they see Germany building up their navy. Britain had pretty much always been I shouldn't say pretty much always been, but probably after the Crusades or so, maybe I take that back. I say after the Age of Exploration, Great Britain is the top dog. Even with the United States, Great Britain is still superior than the United States, in my opinion. They even came back and whooped up on the United States in the War of 1812. The British didn't really make too many treaties because they didn't feel like they needed to team up with anybody, because they were always the best, and they couldn't be attacked. But they're going to realize with Japan, with Germany, with the United States becoming a powerful nation, they have to rethink, is Britain going to make any deals with any countries? Due to the superiority at sea, the British had actually even neglected making any upgrades to their Royal Navy. And what they're going to realize is, hey, we got to change our tune a little bit. And so now, ironically, they become friendly with the United States. They actually, despite our history and going to war against one another, we've always had a really good relationship with the British, aside maybe from 1812 when they come up and back and whoop up on us. But we had a pretty friendly relationship. Japan had also now become a major player. Japan is going to be a country that it was pretty isolated, and in 1850s there's going to be a navy fleet led by Commodore Matthew Perry, who goes to Japan, and they basically give them a 1-year ultimatum to allow the United States to trade in their country. And when the Japanese saw how powerful the United States were, the Japanese changed their tune, and they immediately started becoming industrialized. And Japan is going to want to become an empire just like these other nations. So Japan starts gobbling up territory. So the British, they start making deals with the United States, with the land of the rising sun, the Japanese here. What the Japanese alliance did is it freed the British to worry only about Europe. They said the Japanese would keep Russia in line. The Japanese would also allow the British fleets to travel through Asian waters safely. But this is very clear. The English saw no compromise with Germany. They would not compromise with the Germans. And so that is where we will stop today. So the only thing you need to do, but if you got to this point anyhow, you've already finished it, is complete the Ed puzzle. And then Monday night, I will post Tuesday's content. Keep working hard. Please let me know if you have any questions, my good friends, and good luck on your third week here.